Thank you for allowing me to come to you by way of video this afternoon. As you well know, the challenges of a flight and getting here and then getting back to my home destination has not been easy, and so I'm on a plane flying away while you're listening to this. But as we think about the various ships of ministry, the last one that I want us to think about as a ministry action team is the stewardship team, because every church obviously needs to be able to finance their dreams. And it's a changing dynamic out there today. And one of the things that I've discovered is that churches and pastors have become more reticent about talking about money. I think some of that may be related to the seeker-sensitive movement, well-meaning and well-intentioned, that said, when you come to our church, you don't have to say anything, you don't have to sign anything, you don't have to sing anything, you don't have to give anything. And it really didn't mean that, because even Bill Hybels, who launched a lot of those kind of thoughts as it was relating to reaching unchurched people, made the point that he had a goldfish bowl in the entry of his church, and money was just not coming in. And finally, he decided that even though he wouldn't talk about money on Sunday, and on Saturday night, when he had his new community on Wednesday and Thursday night, he would even have a full month stewardship emphasis, and does to this day. As I started my lectures yesterday, I talked about the fact that my ministry began with insufficient funds. And I think all of us are a lot like my old friend Zig Ziglar, who said, I've been with money and I've been without money, and green goes with everything I wear. The truth is, if we don't have money to finance ministry, then it is very challenging. I love the story about the Baptist preacher who decided that he was going to have the largest mission offering in the history of his church. And he was bivocational, so he was a pastor and an electrician. And so he slipped in on a Saturday night before that special day offering, and he wired all of his chairs to electrical current. He put a little buzzer on the pulpit and discovered that when he pushed that little red buzzer, that all the chairs got a little zit of electricity. And being a very creative pastor, the next morning, after he finished his message, he said, I want everyone who's going to give at least $100 to missions to please stand. And he discreetly pushed that button, and people just started jumping up all over by his own testimony. And he received the largest offering in the history of his church. He did say it was sad to discover in the afternoon that 6 deacons had been electrocuted, which tells you that no matter what you ask people to do, some people aren't going to give. So I want to review as it relates to developing a culture of generosity. And I love 2 Corinthians 8, 3 through 5. It's here in your workbook on page 34. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability, entirely on their own. They urgently pleaded with us for the privilege of sharing in this service to the saints. And they did not do as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord and then to us in keeping with God's will. And so they went beyond expectations and achieved great things for the glory of God, the great Apostle Paul said. Now, here's what I know today. Givers want more say in what happens to the money. They want to see results when they give, and they want to make a difference. And the world is unashamed in terms of asking for money. Coming over last night, believe it or not, Delta actually took up an offering for cancer awareness and said, we want to stamp out cancer. And so the flight attendants, many of them were wearing pink and walking up and down the aisles, or pink ribbons or whatever, and they had little offering deals and buckets, and they came through and took up a collection from that end of our plane. And they'd already turned our pockets inside out on paying for the ticket and made no apology for asking for money. I went into the snack store to get some water, at the Oklahoma City airport, and the lady asked me when I got ready to pay, would you like to give $5 to help us with our military baskets, because so many are coming in and out here of Tinker Air Force Base, and we like to do nice things for them. We like to give them toiletries and candies and things like that. And I said, well, sure. Not long ago, Linda and I were in New York, and we went to a Broadway musical, and they charged us $116 each for our tickets. And at the conclusion of a very good musical, they came down the aisles and said, we're going to receive an offering tonight for AIDS awareness. And without apology, they distributed offering buckets and took a collection after charging us $116 per seat. Why should the church, I say, apologize for the greatest cause in the universe, that the Son of Man would come down from his glory and lay down his life, sacrifice his life? Why not challenge people to give for the most worthy cause in the universe? Now, I think there are barriers to generosity. The first one, and these are all filled in for you in your notes, so I won't spend a lot of time on any particular one, but has to do with the whole entitlement issue. It deals with the current attitudes of the culture, but it also deals with people who have given over the years of the church, and they have certain levels of expectation as to what they think they ought to get for what they give. And as we know, Scripture clearly teaches us that we are to give, and we know that we can't outgive God, but we are not to give with unrealistic expectations. Another problem in churches that I discover is the culture of scarcity. These are churches that have a poverty mindset, and they're just sure that another global recession is coming. They're just sure that there's going to be a day that they've got to have all this money banked, and what I've discovered is churches that are reaching out are not able to do that. They have to take that risk for God. And I don't think, beyond our obligations and mission activities, that having much more than a 90-day fund to operate the church on is necessary, because I believe that God is in control and he's able to meet the needs. If there's a need, he has a prearranged supply through his people, so let's not have a scarcity mindset. The attitude of materialism has become a problem as it relates to stewardship principles and giving. And it is a reminder to me, when we think about the attitude of materialism, that meism pervades the atmosphere, not only the American culture, but also the churches in this country. And you know, it is meism at every turn. And we have to remind people of the lordship issue, and we've been focusing on holiness throughout this particular gathering and conference. And I think when we understand what holiness is all about, it is coming to that place of surrender in our lives where we separate ourselves and we are willing to make sacrifices, and we realize it's not about me, it's about him. And when I experienced the sanctifying power of the presence of the Holy Spirit, it was under the ministry of a general superintendent of the Wesleyan Methodist Church at that time, Dr. R.S. Nicholson, who talked about sanctification in terms of simplistic terms that I could understand. And he said it's simply saying yes to what God's saying yes to and no to what God's saying no to. And that will move you away always from the attitude of materialism. Another one is the whole idea of doubt and the feelings of doubt that people have and the lack of faith. And so we have to challenge people to become trusting in their gifts and generosity to the Lord and his church. Another item, number 5, is the absence of teaching. There's been a 30-year dearth in the teaching on the subject of biblical stewardship. And so for years, I have planned, as part of the Vibrant Church Year, a full-month emphasis, in my case, in the month of January. In Oklahoma City, that works well, but I know that when I was in a farming community in southern Ohio, that it was much easier for me to emphasize stewardship in November because the farmers were about to harvest and they were selling grain and so forth, and being a farming rural community, if we didn't get it in November, we're probably not going to get it in January when the snow was blowing and no farming activity was going on. So it is a timing issue. I like January overall because it is a time of new beginnings. And I'll just give you a little hint that I created a 7-year stewardship track that involves messages that you might preach as a pastor, lessons that you might teach as a layperson and teacher in the church, bulletin inserts, all of that. And pastors, you can go to Nazarene.org. You don't have to join the Church of Nazarene to do this. But go to Nazarene.org, put in the search engine Stewardship Sermons. Stewardship Sermons in the search engine, and you will find Cycle of Victorious Giving. You will find God Rebuilds, The Sacred Blend, World of Possibilities, and you'll find all that material to download, including the graphics, and it includes the teaching for youth, children, and adults. And we can overcome this absence of teaching on biblical stewardship in a full month emphasis, and that's part of the way I sail this ship of ministry. I only preach one Sunday during the year on money, and I tell my people this is the mother of all messages upcoming next Sunday on money, and I'm going to turn your pockets inside out. And then I laugh and I say, we'll also tell you how we're going to spend the money and present our budget. And so, inquiring minds just want to know. And so preaching on the subject of money, presenting the budget, and validating that budget with our values, mission, and vision after a Vision Sunday, the first Sunday before that, makes it easier to raise money for any cause. There's also, this whole indifference issue. And we've got to pray for transformation in the church, that people will be turned from their indifference and their slackness and lethargy to a positive spirit of giving. And then the other one we have to overcome is the abuses that have occurred in local churches, that have occurred over the years through televangelists, you name it, the charlatans out there that have brought shame upon the church and upon generous givers. And the reality is to make sure that we have people who are constantly taking care of the dollars that are given. They want to know that it's well cared for, proper counting, auditing procedures, banking, all that goes with that. And your Wesleyan Investment Foundation will be very helpful to you. If you can't think of anyone to call there, call Larry Moore. He is one of the very best when it comes to this matter of stewardship, and he comes from this part of the country. I first met him in Jamestown, New York, when he was a fledgling youth pastor and helping run a Christian school. And I can assure you that he can assist you with that. Or email me at stantoler.com. Just click on the connect button there, the icon, and send me an email. Let me know how I can help you. But let's overcome these things, because informed people are happy people, and informed givers are happy givers. Now, let me talk to you about ways to raise money for any cause. I believe that there are 4 words that every pastor has to put into their vocabulary when it comes to the stewardship activities of the church, raising money for missions or any other cause. And here we go. The first word is education. The second word is motivation. The third word is invitation. And the fourth word is celebration. Education, stewardship education is critically important. So you're pastor of a Wesleyan church. How are you going to raise money, let's say, for Faith Promise? You want to have, the largest offering for missions, and you don't want to wire all the chairs to electrical current. How's that going to happen? Well, I believe it starts by educating people to how many missionaries are out there ministering around the world in the Wesleyan Church. Education, very, very important. Then how do you move them from that educational piece? And I could give you examples of how I've educated people over the years. Right now, if you said, well, how many Nazarene missionaries do you have serving? I'd say almost 700, 694, I believe, last count, that are serving out there in 159 countries of the world. And that would be an educational fact. And if you say, well, how many churches do you have? I could tell you that. Those are all good things. But even educating people to the cause of Faith Promise, what is Faith Promise? What's the Bible have to say about it? What is a passage that I can hold on to as I make a faith promise for missions? Educate people to how that works. I teach a lot of that in my workshop that I've titled Give to Live, the freedom of being generous with your life. And so I have a book and workbook, just like we do here for Vibrant Church at this event that I teach from. But it's very, very important to educate. But how do you get them motivated? I guess the best way I know how to explain that is we have representatives here with a table for the Jesus film as it relates to the Wesleyan Church. And I can tell you that John and Rick and others here are associated. I know John's a trainer, Rick has been here at the table and so forth. They can help you with this information. But I had the opportunity to write a book with Dr. Bill Bright, who had the vision and the dream for the Jesus film. And I think I can illustrate my point about education and motivation from something that came out of me writing that book with him, Partners of Hope. Now, I might tell you that Dr. Bright was terminally ill in 1997, 98, that realm, when I was writing the book around that time period. And then I would put him on the speakerphone, and I would write down the things that he was saying in my office in Oklahoma City. He would have to take oxygen breaks and then come back and talk. And I remember one day I got into the whole thing of the Jesus film, and he said, well, you know, Stan, when this all started, the Lord gave me a vision of 1 billion souls being won to Christ through the Jesus film. And so, you know, that was an amazing thing to me. It challenged me passionately as a church leader to support the Jesus Film Project and to engage people in giving to it. And as we were talking along, he said, you know, Stan, if you give $1, 3 people somewhere in the world will get to see the Jesus film. And that's education, isn't it? $1, 3 people somewhere in the world get to see the Jesus film. But he said, now, Stan, if you give $3, if you were to give $3, someone accepts Christ somewhere in the world. Now, to me, that's motivation, that you move from people getting to see the film to people finding Christ. And as I was writing about that at Partners of Hope, I also described, in my case, since I was a general superintendent at Church of the Nazarene and also a Nazarene pastor for many years, I was able to describe that partnership that took place starting in 1997, and now it has evolved now into 19,000 churches being planted, 19,000 Nazarene churches being planted worldwide. And I know we've had a good brother from Cuba who's been here to speak, and I understand that at least 11 Wesleyan churches have been planted in Cuba because of the Jesus Film Project, which is extremely exciting. I can tell you that I worked on a board of directors with a group of Major League Baseball players, and they've taken Jesus Film backpacks in, done baseball clinics, showed the Jesus Film, and one trip there, over 1,000 boys and girls made decisions for Jesus Christ. That would motivate you, wouldn't it? And so, you know, the real question is, if I said right now, ushers come forward, what would you give? Would you give $1 or would you give $3? To know that in the last 4 years, John told me at least 500, I hope I have this right, John, at least 500 Wesleyan churches have been planted because of the generosity of Wesleyans to support these Jesus Film teams. Then you'd be motivated. So the reality is you got to move it from education and motivation to invitation. And that means ushers come forward. Don't be ashamed. The world's not ashamed to ask for your money. I go to 7-Eleven, they say, help Jerry's kids. I could go on and on and on about all the things I get asked for every day without apology out there in the marketplace. In the church, we have the greatest cause in the universe. So after you tell someone that, you would frustrate them if you said, I'm not going to let you give today. The truth of the matter is, they will always surprise and give over and above. And by the way, churches that give to missions do not suffer at home. 40 years of pastoring proves that with me, and that brings me to the last one, and that is celebration. When people are generous, they need to know their gifts are appreciated, and that we need to find ways that we can say thank you, thank you, thank you for your generosity. And speaking of missions, where I really learned this principle was in 1978, I went to Honduras. I took several men and women with me on our team, and we did a working witness project at the El Sembrador Farm School. As we were getting ready to leave the country, Don Hawk, who was then alive and serving as a missionary there, said, Stan, you know, I'd love to see the church take up an offering and give $5,000 to plant a church in San Pedro Sula. And I said, I believe you're a man sent from God. I'll challenge the church to do it. We got back to Southern Ohio. Now, you have to understand, my church was only getting, in the offering, on average, $622 a week. And on Sunday morning, I stood up and said, the Holy Spirit has directed me this morning that we should receive an offering for Honduras and give $5,000, which was way over our average $622. I was live on radio. I never expected the response of what would happen in the next few moments, but a lady in the church stood up and she said, Pastor, I'm opposed to that. We're trying to build a new sanctuary out on the property out there and don't have the money, and here you are wanting us to send money to these foreigners. And she said, I'm opposed to it. Now, no one applauded, but I wondered what everybody else thought. And I said something that I regretted. I also regretted that I didn't talk this over with my church board before I brought this subject up, and I'm a mature pastor now, know better. But I said, Sister, the Holy Spirit told me you're out of order. And I could have done it differently, and if I had do-overs, I probably would have. I'd say probably because it's amazing what happened. That morning, the church family gave $5,222.22. And I was just overwhelmed. Tears streamed down all of our cheeks as we rejoiced in generosity and knew that we were going to plant a church. And I said, you're the most generous people in the world. And tonight we're going to have a party. And we're going to have cake, and we're going to have ice cream. And on that cake, it's going to say $5,222.22. And they laughed. And I said, oh, yeah, and we'll also be serving the food that will be served at the great marriage supper of the Lamb. We're going to have pizza. And it'll have pepperoni on it. Because 92% of the American population prefers pepperoni on their pizza. And so we're going to have pizza as well. And they laughed, and we did. And I thank them profusely for their generosity. But, you know, that celebration taught me a lot. And I'd just like to say to you right now that I learned some other things from it. You can't outgive God. And churches that give to missions do not suffer at home because for years now, the farmers that went on that work and witness trip have planted on a 10-acre tract of that church property where we ultimately built that 1,300-seat sanctuary that stands there today as a living testimony of faith and faith promise. But what was so amazing about it is the fact that they took it upon themselves to get people to donate seed and everything else. And for years now, they have taken the proceeds from that crop, which for many, many years, I know it averaged over $5,000 per season of crop raising and harvest and all of that, and planted churches in Honduras, which is very exciting. But another thing happened. 2 weeks after that incident, live on radio, I got a call from an attorney. And the attorney said to me, Stan, your church is going to get an inheritance. And he said, I need to talk to you. And so I went to meet with him, and I was shocked when he said, this person heard you on the radio, and he heard this lady oppose you. And he'd come in and said, you know, I don't know how long I'm going to live, but he said, the attorney, he said, I want to leave. I don't want to leave the state of Ohio. I want to leave everything to Stan Toler's church. And the attorney, his name was John Johnson, said, I asked him, I said, what's the name of his church? And he said, I don't know, but I like that kid. He said, he told Sister so-and-so what for, and I like someone that's strong and able to speak. So that's why I said, if I had do-overs, I'm not sure I'd do anything differently because it was an amazing response. And what I will tell you is that when everything was settled, this man died 2 weeks later, and when everything was settled, we received $156,000 from his estate, which was the impetus to get that 1,300-seat sanctuary started. And all the groundwork and the foundation and the steel and all of that was an end result of that generous gift to our church. And I believe that was one way that God showed me over the years. Don't be afraid to ask, and don't be afraid to celebrate. So never ask people to go on to another giving opportunity until you've celebrated their rich generosity. You've been wonderful to me. Thank you for this opportunity to share. Thank you, Dwight, and your team. Pastor, you've been so helpful and hospitable. I appreciate all the sound crew and the ushers and greeters and everyone that's displayed, the people who prepared meals and all. I celebrate your generosity, and thank you for this opportunity to be here in Pennsylvania. I love you. God bless you.